because you're in the UK.
I am in the UK, and it's hot.
Hot?
Well,
really?
Hot for us.
Oh, okay.
It's hot, muggy, and there's a balance today between opening the windows and letting a breeze in, and you hearing all the racket that goes on outside. So I've gone for closed windows, which is my commitment to the cause.
Wow. Yes. See, this is the mark of a professional. That's funny. All right, it's time to do this. Let's go. Yes. Yeah, we're back. You're back. I'm here. We have a very special guest today. Welcome, everyone, to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name's Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of E+, Forbes, Dun & Bradstreet. And on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop here. We really get technical. It's about the audio engineering aspects of podcast production. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and I have album credits and all that cool stuff. And when I entered podcasting about 5.5 years ago, I realized that not a lot of people in the world of podcasting have the fundamental background. The audio fundamentals are not very strong with a lot of people. So that's where this show can really help. And I'm sharing my experience. And I've been producing podcasts for a while, and I've had to deal with all kinds of situations and recording situations and bad audio and geez. I've had when I think about what I've had to deal with, it's amazing. And of course, Barry's here with me. Barry, are you ready for Steve O'Neill?
Oh, forget it.
He that's all he could say. He doesn't even know what else to say. Well, by the way, and I always forget to say it, but did you know that Podcast Engineering School, I have a monthly email list newsletter thingy that I send out every month. It's once a month, and it's called what is it called actually? I'm going to go to the website here. I'm dialing up my own website. That's right. You like that terminology, Steve? Dialing up?
I thought that was a test when you were asking me what it was called. Oh, God, I've not done my homework.
Oh, man.
He's caught me out already.
It's called Resources for Podcasters and Producers.
Correct.
There you go. That's all it is. And it's a bunch of cool stuff. I have a featured plugin of the month and all that stuff. Or a plugin mention of the month, because I'm not selling plugins. I'm just mentioning plugins. But I am now an affiliate for Waves. So I own a lot of Waves plugins, and now I'm an actual affiliate. And anyway, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not big into affiliate marketing. Like, I really don't know how it all works, kind of thing. I mean, I know how it works, but I've never had really any success with it. So I just thought, hey, I'm talking about Waves plugins all the time, so I might as well be an affiliate. All right, well, you are here. We're going to do this. Steve O'Neill is on the line. He's in the UK. He is the host and producer of Sharp. That's right, Sharp, his podcast. You like that?
That's the one.
I like
Sharp
that.
Podcast.
Barry, you've heard Sharp, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
We can take some lessons from Barry in being sharp, I think.
That's right. You do voiceover work too, right?
I do. Yeah, I have done.
Oh, you have done? Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can do Barry though.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Hey,
Barry, how you doing?
Wait a minute. Hey, Barry, do you think Steve can do your voice pretty well?
No way. You crazy?
Yeah, no. It's all for good fun. You can't really. No one can touch Barry.
Absolutely.
Barry, do you think Steve should really try to get some more voiceover work using the deep voice? You think that'll work?
Nah, it ain't gonna happen.
Oh man! All right, so
bless you, Barry.
Wait, so Steve, do you have like a really awesome? Do you still do voiceovers now?
From time to time in my spare time.
Okay.
I used to do it as a pro, and then bills need to be paid, so I have a day job, and then I do the odd voiceover in my spare time. But the vast majority of my spare time is dedicated to the podcast.
Right, and you mentioned before we started recording that you were doing voiceovers for a while, and that was awesome, and you loved it, and you were able to record them, and you were able to do everything, and then you thought, hey, I'll just start a podcast. How hard could it be? And then what was your experience there?
I don't know what people are complaining about. It's so easy.
Right?
I think, my experience was a very, very steep learning curve, because when you produce a voiceover for a production house, all they want is the raw track. So, I do a little bit of editing to clean it up a bit and just get rid of, obvious breaths and that kind of stuff. But you don't put compression on, you don't put noise gates on, you just send the raw track and they do all of that. So when I started putting because I'm a checklist kind of person, which you would know from the podcast. So when I started to putting my stuff together to produce this podcast, I think, flipping heck, by the time I was on task 125, I figured, actually, I just need to start recording and learn the rest of it on the fly.
That's right. So
plenty to learn.
And your podcast is all about like personal development and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it is. It takes so Stephen Covey's 7th habit of sharpening the saw, and his phrase of, I haven't got time to sharpen my saw because I'm too busy cutting down the tree. It takes that idea and says, well, look, actually, there are lots of things you can do in life to make life more straightforward, simple. Our strap line is so you can spend less time doing the stuff you have to do, so you can spend more time doing the stuff you want to do. So all I do is just share resource and stuff that I know works for other people, works for me. I've had quite a long career in all sorts of stuff, and I just share useful stuff for people. I'm hoping people like it.
It is very useful, and it's really good work that you're doing. If people who listen to this show know that, I wrote a personal development book in 2010, and I'm all about that. Yeah. It's like, and that's why I wanted to bring it up on this show. This show's not about personal development, but for all you people listening who want to further your career or have a career in podcast production or editing or even have any career, it's key to work on yourself. Like, make yourself a strong instrument of getting stuff done in an efficient way and in an easy way. And that way you can just achieve more. That's like, I don't care what anyone's doing, like to earn money or what their job is or anything. Everyone needs to focus on making themselves a stronger, more healthy person, because then you could just achieve stuff. It's much easier, right?
Absolutely. Jeez. And even in the podcast sphere, I take each recording session as practice, do it with some intention, and actually, how can I make that a little bit better next time, and so on, and just keep doing that and applying that process. I can't see why you wouldn't do that.
Right? I love that. I can't see why you wouldn't do that. It's habit, right? That's the only reason. Bad habits. It's just bad habits. That's a line from a movie that I like, A Love Song for Bobby Long with John Travolta and Scarlett Johansson. Anyway.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, there's some deer right in my backyard. They just ran by the door. Hey, guys.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. So, all right, let's do the speed round. Everyone's waiting. The people listening are probably like tapping their desk like, what is this? I want my speed round. So let's go through the speed round.
Okay.
Take us quickly through like just the production. You're all ready to record a podcast. Just tell us about the equipment and the workflow, starting with the mic and where the signal flows, and then through to the editing and the posting. Just give us the overview.
Okay, no worries. So I record on a Rode Procaster mic. I like Rode gear. I use an NT1 for the voiceover stuff. And I've had this ever since I've been producing the podcast. It's a great mic. It's on a Rode PS1 arm, and that goes into a DBX 286S channel strip, where I put on a tiny bit of compression, a little bit of noise gate, smallest amount of de-esser, that's it, high pass filter. Then I run from there into a Focusrite 2i4 Scarlett, and that then takes a signal, obviously converts it onto my trusty Windows laptop that's running a bit slow today. It's run out of gas. I need to put a bit more of a gas injection into the side of it, I think. I record into Adobe Audition and do all my editing on Audition, and I record at 48,000 kilohertz 24-bit mono as a WAV file. Then do a little bit of post-production, bit of EQ, bit of compression, tiny little bit of mastering, and then process that down to minus 19 LUFS, edit it, and I've got some PreSonus Eris E5 monitors and some Sennheiser 280 Pro headphones. I like to listen to the mix on speakers and headphones and back and forth and so on until it's right, and then squash it all down to an MP3 and send it out into the big wide world. Is that 60 seconds?
This was the best speed round ever. I need to come up with like a little pin that you can wear. Best speed round on the podcast.
You can't see me pointing to my equipment. I go from there to there into that.
That'd be a cool visual. So wait, I just wanted to write it down. The headphones are the Sennheiser 280s?
Yeah, the Sennheiser 280. They're called 280 Pro. I don't know if the Pro makes any difference, but I like them because they've got a really neutral sound. I do my the majority of the sound editing. So where I am an editor. I like to get rid of stuff. I like to get rid of noises and try and get it as clean as possible, because I think it's important for listeners to not be distracted by stuff. So I use the headphones to do the first pass edit, and then if I'm interviewing somebody or it's a long podcast for myself, I'll then do a second edit using the speakers where I can do the big chunky stuff, cut out the big sections that we're not going to use, that kind of stuff. So
okay.
I like to hear on both of them. And then I'll go to the car, listen to it in the car. Then I'll put it on my phone, listen to it as an MP3 through some earbuds. Because I think it's important to have that sound coming as clean as you can through whatever method that people are going to choose to use to listen to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the PreSonus monitors, do you know what monitors they are? What's the model number or anything?
Yeah, they're the PreSonus Eris E5. They were a recommendation from a fellow voiceover artist, and I like them because so they're active monitors. They've got a nice neutral sound, but you can adjust the sound depending on the dynamics of your room. So if you're getting a lot of bass, and I don't have bass traps or anything in the room, I've got a studio in the corner that I built myself out of wood and rock wool, and so I've got a ceiling and a gobo around the side, so it's all dampened. But when I do my editing, the sound is coming out into the room, and I have quite high ceilings in this room. So with these PreSonus speakers, you can adjust the output to get a really neutral sound to make sure that you're editing clean.
Nice. And it just has like a couple little switches on the back of the speaker. That's how you adjust it?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, you mentioned before that you like to edit it well to give a good experience for the listener. And I just remembered something that I have to say things when I think of them, or else I'll forget, because I can write down some notes here, but when I record these shows, I do it like it's live, and I just kind of go. So I was just on a road trip to Podcast Movement, and I just got back last night. So now everybody knows basically when we're recording this. Not that it's a secret, but I was on the road, and I got to listen to a couple of Dan Carlin's Hardcore History episodes.
Oh, wow.
Which, of course, if you haven't heard that show, just go find it and listen to one. You'll be amazed how... First, you'll see that the episode is 6 hours long, and you'll be like, what the heck? And then you'll listen to it, and you'll be like, that was the best episode I've ever heard in my life. But anyway, so it's a good road trip podcast, right? So I'm listening, and one of the things that happens on the road is you have the road noise, the car noise and everything, and you kind of have to turn up the speakers a little. And I was listening on my earbuds because my car is from 2008, and it doesn't have the Bluetooth audio connection, which is very, very annoying. I mean, sometimes I want to like go buy one and have it installed, but then it's like, well, the car's already 9 years old, and what if it only lasts another year or two? Then whatever. Anyway, so I'm listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, and at times he speaks louder, at times he speaks very softly. He's a dynamic guy, right? He when he quotes people, when he reads quotes, he'll talk in this voice and he'll read the quote, which is actually awesome, because then it's a good distinction that, okay, he's reading a quote now as opposed to himself just talking. But there is times when he will just get quiet and like this, and it's just quiet. And so sometimes when I'm driving down the road, the quiet parts get lost in the road noise, and then the loud parts are good. They're even a little bit loud. So I was thinking one of the ways to remedy that situation, to sort of even out the highs and the lows, but even it out in such a way where you don't ruin the dynamics of the sound very much. And that is to use a compressor on it, use a little compression on it, but make the release time like really long, like 2.5 or 3 seconds, like literally 3 seconds, like meaning 3,000 milliseconds, right? So that's a long release time. But what it does is it'll squash down the loud parts a little bit, and relatively it means that it's bringing up the low parts. But the actual inflection and the emphasis he puts on syllables and all that, none of that will really be affected. So I was thinking, and actually Dan Carlin was at Podcast Movement, which I didn't meet him though because I was working a booth the whole time. But anyway, when I met him, I was going to first guess his microphone because I have 2 guesses of what microphone he uses, and I was going to mention something about, possibly using a little, compression just for the people who are, doing 85 miles an hour across, New Mexico or something. So,
what are your guesses, Chris? What were your guesses on his mics?
Well, if I guess now, then he might change his mic and make me wrong. No, I'm kidding. Okay. The main thing is it sounds like a condenser because it's very articulate. It's very clear and articulate. So I would guess it's either a Rode Broadcaster or possibly a Blue Yeti. Or it's another condenser. That's my third guess. It's another condenser. Anyway, so I don't know if I'm right. Maybe I should tweet at him. I don't know, but I don't know if he would respond. Anyway, that was a nice little side road. So let's get back. Let's go through your workflow and your equipment. Let's start from the beginning. So you have a Rode Procaster, which is the Rode Procaster is the model that's between the Podcaster and the Broadcaster. Yes. I hope that's not confusing for you listening. But the Procaster, it's about, because I just looked all this up. We were supposed to have one in our microphone test drive booth. It's about $230 US dollars, and it's a dynamic microphone. And I think it's like the same shape and size as an RE20, sort of. It might be a little thinner and longer. Yeah. But how do you like the Rode Procaster?
Well, I went for the Procaster because previously I have a Shure SM58, which I use for if I'm doing interviews mobile or so on, and that's obviously a great workhorse. And that was my first experience with a dynamic microphone. So I went for the Rode Procaster because I love Rode mics. As I've mentioned before, I use the NT1 condenser mic for the voiceover work. And the voiceover works in a slightly different environment to where I do the podcast. With the podcast, because it's long form, I like to be a bit more relaxed. So I'm sitting in the chair, a bit less excited about removing every single little detail. And I find that I wanted to stick with a dynamic mic for that reason, because it's a bit more forgiving. You can take a breath to the side, like I just did, and no one can hear it. And nice. So I wanted to stick with a dynamic. I like the Rode equipment, and I found that the Procaster, it gives a very, very similar frequency response to the Shure. It's quite a soft sound. And you can really tell the difference between that when I record on this and then I compare it to the NT1. So it's noticeably different being a dynamic mic. But I think there's a nice enough balance to get enough frequency range through it, but without it picking up every single thing that can happen in this echoey room that I'm in. So I think it's a nice balance.
And are you using that mic right now?
I'm using it now, yeah.
Yeah, using it now. Okay. And does it have a good strong output level? I know some dynamic mics, the output is really weak, and therefore you have to crank the preamps and introduce all this noise and stuff. How's the output level of the Procaster?
Yeah, I think the output level is quite low, so I have to have it goes straight into the 286, and the preamp setting on the 286 is set to maximum, and then the Scarlett is set to just slightly shy of 12 o'clock. So there's quite a lot of gain coming through the equipment. I was experimenting recently, and what I found on the Scarlett is that if I switch it from line to instrument, I can turn the gain right down on the Scarlett and actually turn the gain down a little bit on the DBX as well. And I'm finding, I think that's giving me a slightly cleaner sound as well. So I'm just experimenting with that at the moment. But yes, it's gain hungry. It's like the Shure. You've got to crank the preamp up.
Okay, that's interesting. Changing it from mic to instrument, because that instrument is typically used for plugging guitars and stuff right into, like, directly into the preamp. So, because I think it changes the impedance of the input, which I'm not an expert on impedance. I don't, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, the good thing about audio is you do whatever you want and you hear how it sounds. And if you like the way it sounds, then you just leave it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the whole, I mean, I'm on 22 episodes now. And every episode I'm just tweaking a little bit.
Right.
And I went back and listened to episode 1 recently and I thought, crikey, that sounds very, very different. But, I just, like I said at the start, I think each one's a journey and what can I just do a little bit better each time. And your show's been fantastic. I am honored and humbled to be on here because I've learned so much from your episodes. I've stolen everything. So, sometimes twice.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love to hear that. Because it's like that's what this show's for. It's like so everyone can learn and do it. Sound better, sound great. So the DBX 286, the channel strip, that's a good unit for podcasters, actually. So you use a little compression and a little bit of a gate and a little bit of the de-esser. So how did you?
That's it.
Did you basically like spend a few hours one day just doing all kind, talking into it and switching things and listening back and everything?
Absolutely. One of the things I've learned in doing this, and the same applies to my EQ settings as well, is to turn everything right up, and then one by one, just see as you turn each one down again. Okay, that's changing. That sounds better. That sounds different. And because I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I then record it onto an MP3 and go and listen to it in the car. And I'd have like 10 different settings. I'd make a note of every different setting, and then go and listen to all 10 in the car. Eliminate 8 of them. Come back and change it. So yeah, it does. It has taken a while to get to somewhere where I think it's just about right. But I am a tweaker, and I take photographs of all of the settings, so I've got it stored in case the kids come in and start messing with the knobs and that kind of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, they make these recall sheets as well. Like they call them recall sheets because it's like a piece of, it's like a printout of the front of it with the knobs, and then you can actually draw in like exactly where the knob is pointing. And then like once you get your setting, you can just make notes of it on that piece of paper, and then you can have that. So if the kids come in and change it, you can always
have a look.
Change it back.
You see, even being on the show, I'm still learning stuff. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
We used to do, when I was working on music, I mean, there was so much outboard gear, so much gear, it was crazy. And like we would have sheets and like you'd have like 20 pages of recall sheets. It's like you'd have to, at the end of a mix session, you'd have to go through, and let's say they're using 30 pieces of outboard gear, 5 EQs, 7 compressors, 4 delays, and all these different reverbs and stuff. We would have to, as the assistant engineer, you'd have to go through every single piece of gear and write down every setting that is on it, where it is. Because if 3 months from now, the record label decides, you know what, the vocal needs to be a little louder, and we want to overdub a keyboard part too. But the rest of the mix, we love it. So literally, we would have to recreate the mix in the studio, as best you can, because it's never 100%. You know what I mean? So you literally would need to know every setting of every knob of everything.
I have the same when I'm doing. I get a little bit of voiceover work from a repeat client, and sometimes it can be a year or two before I need to record again. And exactly the same, I have a particular set of settings for the voiceover, and I have them written down and photographed and stored on box crypta, so because it's really important. I want that sound to sound the same. I want it to be consistent, because if someone in one of their training rooms is listening to DVD 2 and then they play DVD 3 afterwards, I want them to feel like it sounded like they were recorded together. Yeah. And there wasn't a year gap in between them. So, I get that.
Yeah, and my friend Mike Helms, who actually helped me at the booth at Podcast Movement, he's my friend from back in New York. He's also an audio engineer. He worked on voiceover work a lot, and he told me that one of the studio one of the studios he was at for a while, they would have like a house. You know, they had multiple studios, but they had like a house sound. So they'd have a house microphone and the signal chain. Like the microphone and the signal chain was the same every time in the recording process. Obviously, post-production, you can do whatever, but the recording process was always the same. So that way, like you said, if a year later the guy comes back in and wants to, do something different, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you got the DBX and you're checking out the sound and you're going in your car. I really like that, man. I tell my students do that for sure because I have them check the sound all over the place. But that's a really good thing to do. And what's cool is once you do enough of it, like, you can go nuts for like a few days or like a week or something, but you don't have to do that constantly. Like once you're comfortable with it, then you just leave it. But then maybe like a year later, if you keep tweaking things like I do and you do, like I've tweaked my sound on this show like literally every episode and little tweaks, right? But it's significant over time. So then after you've tweaked it a little bit, like maybe it's like a year later, then you can redo it all, record it again and then go in the car and on your phone and on a Bluetooth speaker. So that's awesome. I'm glad you're doing that. That makes a big difference.
Well, I was listening to, I can't remember if it was the last episode or the one before, the chap was talking about referencing and exactly that. And I know that when I first started, I listened to 2 or 3 different podcasts and I picked a couple and I thought, that's the sound I want. That's how I want to sound. So I'd compare the playback of my recording in the car, in the headphones, to these other podcasts, and each time just make a little adjustment. So instead of just, kind of going off on one tangent and increasing the compression and thinking, how does that sound? And then mashing something else in, I was comparing it each time to the sound I wanted to get. And I found that made it a lot easier for me to get closer and closer to the right sound. And it also means then that when I need to reset all those settings, I know which ones I want to compare it to and I've got a reference for it.
Nice. So tell me about this little studio area that you built there to be a little more obviously soundproof or sound absorbing, right?
Yeah, well, I started off recording with a set of bifold doors and a blanket over the top, and some pillows stuffed in various places.
Nice.
And that was fine, and it sounded okay. But I wanted something a bit more robust, something actually I could move around in instead of sort of being hunched down in the corner. So I found a link online, and in fact I wrote a blog about this. I took photographs of building the studio on my voiceover blog, and how my cats refused to help me. They just sat there watching. So I built two gobos which are hinged and then they're bolted together. So essentially I've got four walls in like a C shape, and then I built another one for the top. You can tell I'm looking up.
Yeah,
I built one for the top.
By the way, for you listening, if you don't know what a gobo is, it's like a temporary kind of movable little wall in a way, and they're different sizes and stuff, but they're used in studios to like usually they're on wheels and you can roll them places and you can almost make like a little room. So anyway, that's what a gobo is.
Does it stand for go between? I think.
Yeah,
I read somewhere.
And they're also sometimes called baffles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is this essentially acts as my studio. So I've got some Auralex in the corners, and I sit in here with a mic pointing at me, and it stops the sound from bashing around in the room. So there's rock wool in it, and they're covered in felt, and it's nice. Gives me a bit of space. And, it just means I can get a good sound. I've got control over the sound. I can give it a bit of welly, and it doesn't echo around too much, and it's good.
Yeah, I'm going to email you later if you can give me a link to that post. So I'll put it in the show notes, and people can go through and click and see the pictures of your that little space. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
No worries.
All right, so then you have you're recording into Audition, but you also have a Zoom H5N. The Zoom's just for the backup?
No, the Zoom is for mobile recording. So in my podcast, one of the things I try to do as a point of difference is to have I call them like little audio packets. And sometimes it's just me walking down a country lane talking into my Zoom. Other times I'm interviewing my partner on stuff. Sometimes I'll really go to town and I record almost like a little multi-track within the multi-track where I've got a sound that it sounds like I'm in the shower while there's a shower noise and the thoughts are rattling through my head, to try and just break it up a little bit, because I'm on most of the episodes, I'm not interviewing somebody. I do a few. I've got about 4 episodes out now with interviews, but often it's just me talking, and I just like to break it up. So I make these little multi-tracks within these multi-tracks, and sometimes I'll go out and capture a sound or download a sound from from some royalty-free websites, and just create these little audio junkets just to break it up a little bit. And so I use the Zoom H5N for mobile recording, and often it'll be just Lisa and I sitting on the kitchen table talking about emails or something. And I like the way that when you record, and I literally just record that either with a Shure or with a built-in mic, I like the way it changes the tone of the sound. So it breaks it up a little bit. And I think for the listener, you go from a very clean studio sound, and then you go to an outside sound, and you've got all the reverb and all the noise and all the background. But I keep that all in because I don't want it to sound too polished, too processed. And just so I learned from my training background about habituation, where people hear the same thing over and over again, and they tend to switch off. Some people will have switched off right now. Pay attention. Hello? And they're back in the room.
Yeah.
But so I like the fact that that's actually got quite a raw sound and quite a noisy background noise and so on, and it just breaks it up. So that's what I use the Zoom for. I love it.
That is really nice. I love that idea of the contrast. It's like, clean studio environment sound for a while, and then it's like, well, then that way, then you're in a different environment with a whole different soundscape, if you will, or just a different ambience. And then the listener is like, oh, now he's in the kitchen and stuff. That's pretty cool, that contrast.
Yeah. And I it's going a bit far now, because I have conversations with myself. So I'm out. I have Steve in the field, who's the guy out mobile, and then Steve in the studio. Right. And I have conversations with myself out in the field. Yeah, absolutely. And Steve in the field sometimes is literally in a field, so you can hear the sheep and cows in the background, because I'm in quite a rural part of the world. And, I think it's almost like I'm interviewing someone else. So this guy's my alter ego, and he steps in cow pats and he gets things wrong and he doesn't do his research and all that kind of stuff. So just a bit of fun.
That is pretty cool. So do you you script the questions, and then when you go in the field, you know what you're going to ask yourself, kind of thing?
Yeah, so I use a combination of Nozbe and Evernote, which are my 2 favorite apps. And in Evernote, I have a checklist for every episode, and I write a script into Evernote, which means that I can take that on my phone. I go outside, so I generally will record the outdoor bit first. But I know that I'm, if you like in radio parlance, I'm taking a cut from the studio to outside and back in again. So I try to make it sound like that that I've just had Steve on my headphones coming in, say, right, over to you. And now I'm out in the field, and there's all sorts of cars going around and so on. Back to you, Steve. So I'll record that bit first, and then I'll record the studio bit and mix them together, and sometimes it works.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And then, okay, so you assemble everything in Audition. You're recording and assembling in Audition. How do you like Audition?
I love it. I started off on Audacity, and I moved over to Audition about 4 years ago for the voiceover work, and I love the speed at which you can edit. I'm a fan of shortcuts and keyboard shortcuts and that kind of stuff. So I use the spectral analyzer a huge amount, so I can see a click, I can see a noise, I can go in and just wipe it out, and I love the visual quality of it. So absolutely love Audition. The one thing I'm finding challenging is if I'm doing an interview, if I'm recording someone. So for example, I've done 2 interviews with Zencastr and 2 interviews as double enders. And obviously when you do a double ender, one of the things I learned is, of course, you get a time drift because people's PCs work at different rates, which means that when you line the 2 tracks up, they don't line up in the multi-track. And what I've learned actually is I can from the mistakes I've made, I can cut out huge chunks of the gaps in between just to get them to line up. Because I realize, okay, that person's not speaking now, so I can just take out 2 seconds there and get the next bit to line up. But I stole an idea from one of your episodes where about putting the 2 tracks into a WAV file, one in the left channel and one in the right channel. And that way, not only can I cut the big lumps out, but visually I can see where the noises and sounds are coming from as well. So that really speeds up my processing time. It's really, really heavy on the computer. If you've got 2 big WAV files and you've got one in the left channel and one in the right channel, and you're editing it as an audio file instead of a multi-track, you've got to turn everything else off because my PC just won't have it. But I find that makes it a swifter process. So absolutely love Audition.
Yeah, and the drift you're talking about when you line up the two files, it's pretty slight, right? It's not like 2 or 3 seconds, right? It's like really, maybe 100 milliseconds or less, right?
You're right, but being the perfectionist I am, what I tend to notice is if I ask a question and there is just a beat before the person answers, I can tell that's a gap.
Right.
And my aim at the end of the day, Chris, is to create a sound where people can listen to it and there is nothing for them to pay attention to that distracts them from it. So everything I can remove, everything I can make sound as natural as possible. I spent 8 hours doing an edit on a voice on an interview recently because I had to cut out quite a lot in different places, but I wanted the interview to sound clean and natural, as if we'd literally just pressed record and started talking.
Right.
And that's why I spend a lot of my time just cleaning those things up. No one will notice, and to be honest with you, if they don't notice, then I've done my job.
Right. Yeah, I also agree. I think even if the drift is very slight, I also line it up and fix it. And I do what you do. I cut out parts and then I can slide different clips. Sometimes it's more difficult when like someone like my guest, if they have their headphones really loud and there's a little feedback of my voice on their track.
Yeah.
Then when the two tracks don't line up, then you can hear me, like you'll hear my voice and then you'll hear like almost an echo really low. And it's like, then you got to line, you could try to use a gate. There's different things you can do, different ways to handle that. But certainly lining it up it just makes life easier if you can line it up and then there's none of that like echo or delay type thing.
And one of the things I love about Audition is that in the multi-track, as you'll know, and people who use it, I'm sure will know, you can stretch the track. So if it's just drifted a little bit over time and actually it hasn't sort of gone out and come back in again, which happens sometimes, you can just grab that little corner and just adjust it by 2% or 0.5% or whatever. And as long as you don't drag it by too much, it still sounds clean and it sounds good. Do it too much and it sounds a bit synthesized, a bit electronic, but there's that little adjustment there which can make quite a big difference.
Right. All right, so you're assembling everything in Audition, and those little bits you were talking about earlier with the sound effects and the different things, those probably take quite a bit of time to get right?
They do. And there's always a balance between making sure that I'm providing some content that is useful for people, which I think is the most important thing, but also making sure that there's something there that just breaks it up and makes it a bit interesting and so on. But I do obsess, and I do tend to spend sometimes, I'll spend like 2 or 3 hours just getting a multi-track within a multi-track just right, so I'm happy that the level of the sound of the shower and me whistling, and I got in one of my episodes there's me in the shower while you can hear the thoughts in my head. It wasn't real. It wasn't recorded in the shower. Don't worry, listeners. But getting those things so they sound natural is really important to me, and that's where I spend my time. So they tend to be few and far between, and I tend to focus as much as I can on just the general getting out and about and the raw audio and just including a bit of that just to break it up. But I do find myself fiddling and tweaking.
Right. And when you have done interviews, you said you've done 4. How much do you process the other person's audio in terms of like EQ and compression and that kind of thing?
It depends. 2 of the interviews I've done have been with other voiceover people. So they've got a really clean sound. They're in a studio, and there's not really very much. So I'll just apply the same level of compression that I apply to mine. I'll apply it across the board, and it sounds clean. I had an episode where I was recording someone, and he was talking into the microphone on his laptop in a busy London flat on a hot summer's day with a window open, and there was a lot of noise. And what I was finding was that I had a choice now. I've either, because my sound is clean and there's clear gaps between when I'm not talking, and he's got a lot of background noise, I either need to keep all of his background noise in, or I need to start to cut it out. But what I was finding is that as it went from me talking to him talking, there's like a jar, because he'll talk and there's background noise, then I'll come in and it's really clean, and then he'll come back again. And so what I did was, which probably was something that someone with your background and experience would say, flip a neck, you're going the wrong way, Steve. I introduced some white noise. I added some white noise across the whole track, both tracks, and it was a tiny amount. It was just a little bit imperceptible. But what it seemed to do is when you listen back, you don't seem to get that jar. So it wasn't going from a sound with zero background noise to a sound with a load of background noise. And I found that actually that made it acceptable to listen to, instead of me spending 16 hours and a noise gate and a filter trying to get rid of every single bit of background noise to make his sound the same as mine. So that was my tip from the top. A little bit of white noise, very, very low, very quiet. You wouldn't know unless someone had told you it was there. But psychologically, when you listen back, it seemed to stop that jump from one to the other, and it's almost like it made it a consistent sound across. So I probably desecrated it in your with your experience, Chris. But
no, that's a great fix. No, if it works, if it sounds better that way, yeah. The stark difference between background noise and no background noise is that definitely can be distracting. So that's good what you did. And there's other, like, I just thought of this one. I think it's a website called Coffeetivity, but like it's like just the background noise of a coffee shop.
Yeah, I have it. It's an app on my phone.
Oh, really? Yeah. So like that's
and
another thing.
You're right. It's called Coffeetivity.
Like you can find like, some back, it could be a coffee shop, could be anything. Just find any background noise. Could be the ocean. You could play some ocean, but obviously it has to fit in with your show. I mean, it can't be too off the wall, but that's another way to do what you did. And of course the best fix for that kind of situation is in the recording phase is to try to sound check your guest and basically sound check the guest enough so you eliminate all those things even before you start recording, and so then you don't have to deal with them later.
I think that sometimes there's a balance, isn't there, between when you're for this show you're talking to professional podcasters and people that know what they're doing and so on. There's a balance, of course, if you're recording. This particular episode was my brother. He's a comedian. He does voiceover work as well, but he doesn't have a studio in his home. And, you go into the session and suddenly there's all this noise, and there really isn't very much you can do about it. You've either got your hour or you haven't got your hour. And it's tricky. It's tricky sometimes to be able to prepare for that. But, as you said, there's a balance, and I'm sure you've got lots and lots of examples of where you're having to clean that kind of stuff up for other people. It's a balance, isn't it, between getting some good content and asking your audience to be a little bit forgiving of the distractions, or, sorry, can we reschedule for an hour's time because it just sounds terrible. Right. And he didn't sound terrible, by the way. I think he sounded okay.
Yeah, good. And so the other thing, actually in the podcast engineering school course, I spend like almost a whole class talking about connecting over the internet and interviewing people and sound checking them and all the different mics they can have and all the different setups they can be in and all the different ways that you can coach people to sound better. Because you're right, in some cases you're on the, you connect and you got to do the interview. That's it. And you got to start in 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Even then, there's still things you can do to make sure that you're recording more of the voice than the background and all that kind of stuff. So that's good though. I like that. I like what you did. So when you do these little audio packets, with different music and different sounds and stuff, do you use what kind of effects do you use on them? Like EQ and compression? Do you also use some reverb and delays or anything like that?
It depends where the sound has come from. If I'm using a downloaded effect, I try to there's a website called freesound.org, and on Freesound you can download sounds and you can filter. So those that are on in a public domain sound, they're not restricted by license. They set them up so you can filter a sound and you can say, okay, show me all the sounds of, I don't know, a grenade, and I'd like to see all the grenade sounds, and I'd only like to listen to the ones that are Creative Commons 0. They have no restriction because people have put them up. Now the quality of those sounds can vary tremendously. So a lot of my time is listening to the sound and thinking, okay, that's been clearly recorded quite far away from if I want to get a sound of a shopping mall or a road or some sort of background noise. And I guess I think I've now got an ear for stuff that sounds okay, stuff that sounds a little bit harsh or a bit distant. And sometimes I'll clean it up a little bit. I tend to import it into usually actually an MP3 file and clean it up, tidy it up, get rid of the start and end, and just make it sound okay. But it's one of maybe 4 or 5 different sounds. So the quality of each individual sound is not crucial so long as the levels are right and the end sound. Yeah, that sounds like he's in the street and he's talking to someone. Or that sounds like, he's standing by a busy roadside or something like that. And that's, to me, it's just to the ear. So I don't really do a lot of processing because the original sound sources, I tend to only select the ones that I think are going to fit. But that is quite time consuming.
Got it.
Freesound.org is where I go, and there's loads and loads of stuff there. There's no royalty, no license restrictions. I'm really careful about making sure I only include things, whether it's the imagery, whether it's the content, that I always reference the right person. I always, explain where stuff has come from, because in this day and age, we put stuff out. I'd hope people would have the same respect for me if they were using something from one of my podcasts. And I think it's important to do that. So I really do make sure I restrict myself to stuff that has been put out for public domain, because someone somewhere will spot it. And if you've used it in an episode 20 episodes ago and you've chanced your arm and used something that's got a license on it, when I'm rich and famous, that's when they'll find out.
Exactly. I agree with your philosophy on that. Just I only use stuff that I'm allowed to use, and that way you can sleep at night. You don't have to worry about anything. Just easier. Yeah. So, all right. So in Audition, do you do all your editing before? So you do all your editing in Audition, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll edit. So if it's a straightforward podcast, so just my voice, I have a template in the multi-track. So the intro's on there, the sound effects are on there, the outro music is all on there. So all I'll do is I'll record the audio into a WAV file, place that WAV file into the multi-track that's already got all of the other bits and pieces. So I'm saving a lot of time just by moving the slider around and getting it to where it needs to be. And then I can start mixing the levels and just to make sure it balances up.
Nice. And then as far as like editing, you said you do a fair bit of editing. Do you take out like all the ums and all the little mouth noises and everything? Do you get nutty, Steve?
If it's my voice, I do.
Okay.
And I think probably because having come from the background of producing, trying to produce really clean, raw voiceover tracks for people, because that's how I got into this world. I am quite nutty, but also I think there's a balance, and actually sometimes you take out too much, it doesn't sound natural. So there is a balance between keeping those things, keep some of those breaths in, keep some of those ums in, maybe just take the level down a little bit. But it's important to keep them there because we use them in natural conversation.
Right? Yeah, that's a balance right there between clean and natural.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when I'm interviewing someone, I'll tend to leave more of them in because it helps the flow of the conversation. And it's fairly obvious if you cut out a breath or an and you cut that out and the person goes straight from one word to the other, you can make the transition clean, but I believe psychologically, that word had something before it. You can't quite. And again, it kind of brings people back. If people realize they're listening to a podcast and someone's done something to it, I've failed. If people can listen to it and there's nothing there for them to pay attention to. So sometimes it's better to keep them in and just make that sound more natural, for sure.
Right. One thing I've noticed is that some people, it depends on the individual, but some people use ums in such a way that when you remove them, it does feel unnatural. Like I don't even know how that happens, but when you just remove the it's like the energy and the inflection it doesn't make 100% sense anymore, and you kind of feel it like, it just doesn't sound right. And then so that's a tough situation, because what do? Do you leave in the ums? I mean, if there's a million, of course you got to take out a bunch, but there's been many ums that I've taken out and I listen back to it and I go, nope, got to leave it in, and just leave it in. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And then particularly where they'll flow into the word that they're saying. But also, as you said, sometimes they'll say and then they'll say the word, and you take the out, and it just doesn't sound natural. And there are lots of different schools, and there are lots of different people do things different ways. And I found my way is to try and keep it as clean as possible. If it's me, I tend to be more more picky. I tend to take more out. But certainly if it's a conversation that I'm having with other people, then I'll tend to err on the side of keeping it natural.
I just realized a good example of when this happens, what I just said happens. It's when someone, like, they finish a sentence, okay? Then they're about to start the next sentence, and they take a big, deep breath in. And so they're basically gearing up to give a lot of energy to the next word or the next sound. And that sound is an so the will be really loud. They'll be like, But then when they come in with the next word, it's a low volume. So it's like,
yeah.
Well, I don't think so. And like when you cut out the it's like this big in breath, and then, well, I don't think so. And it just doesn't make sense. Like it just not, they were gearing up to give a lot of energy, and then they didn't give a lot of energy, and that's what makes it sound weird. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And one of the things I've found, particularly if I'm editing a long recording, I use keyboard shortcuts quite a lot, and I've found a few where I can do Control J or Control H or Control U, and what it'll do is it'll put like a little bell curve on that in between the two words, and it'll just take the sound down. You can set it to 2-3 decibels, whatever. So what you're doing is you're quickly reducing the volume of that sound. You're not having to do that physical highlight it, drag the volume down a bit, listen to how it sounds, and it'll just fade out the end of the start bit, fade in the start of the next bit, and take the volume down in the middle. And sometimes that just takes the harshness out. And because it's literally highlight, control, click, if you've got to do that 1,000 times in an interview, that can save a huge amount of time.
So wait, you're not cutting out the and you're not bringing the volume all the way down to zero, virtually cutting out the All you're taking it down 2 or 3 or 4 dB, right?
Yes, exactly. So
it just
the sound
doesn't
is
hit
still
as
natural,
hard.
but
right.
Exactly.
Interesting. That's a nice trick. See, I learned something there. I'm going to try that one. For those ones that I can't take out, I'm just going to take it down. I do that sometimes even with S's. Yeah. Sometimes and S's. Like, I don't do the fade thing like you did. That's cool. I would just, if the is really loud, I would just, highlight it and normalize it down like, 3 or 4 dB. But I do that with S's sometimes too. Sometimes people start sentences with an S, and the S is just so loud. It's like, how did that S get to be that loud? So you can actually just clip the S and then just bring the volume down. Like even like 6 or 8 dB, you can bring it down. It still sounds, then it sounds a lot better.
Well, for me, it's my A's. If I say anything beginning with A, I don't understand how that can be super loud, but it is. And I find that it must just be in my voice. The attack of that A is quite loud, and sometimes will clip. In fact, I can see the red light. It's happened in this conversation.
Right.
So using that little a little fade in, which is just literally I've set it up on my keyboard as Control/. Then what I'll do is I'll just highlight the start of that Control/, and it will just fade that in a little bit. So it just takes the harshness out of it without having to do the highlight it and then bring the volume down.
Right.
And when I find that because it's reducing the volume and it's fading it a little bit, you can get away with a little bit more than just dropping that down. But
right,
that's after having spent many hours on the editing thing, on the roller, on my mouse, wrist aching, needing some fresh air.
Yeah, fading is like the advanced editing trick. Fading, just little tiny fades, like fading in like 20 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds on certain things that come in harsh, or even at the end. Like sometimes people will finish a word, they'll add to the end of a word. And like you can clip out the but then sometimes the word the end of it'll be just it'll end abruptly. It'll just be like it just ends, and so you can tighten up that edit if you can, like cut more off, or you can fade out the last 30 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds, and then it just it just makes it smooth, right? It just makes it undetectable, which is what we go for. All right,
and
so
that's
then
the aim, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. So when you're mixing down. So you do all your editing and then you render it out of Audition, and you use what kind of mastering tools? Do you use a multiband compressor or anything like that?
Yeah, I use I use actually the tube model compressor on Audition, and I select the light mastering setting. And because I've already got a compressor on in the hardware going in, I don't really want to give, when it's my voice, I don't want to give it too much compression. So I'll just give it a little bit of tube modeling compressor. I'll use the light mastering. I've got a 30-band EQ setup, custom, which I did that experiment that we talked about before, where you put it all flat, raise each one at a time, and get rid of the sounds. And I found, I'm sure it came from one of your episodes. There's a website called Pro Sound Formula, and that's by a guy called Rob Williams, and he has this vocal cheat sheet. So it shows you where you can, what the impact is. So I use that to start off with, and then just tweaked it for mine. So it's a 30-band multi-press, 30-band EQ setting, which is just customized to mine. Tube modeled compressor, just a little bit of light mastering, and then I'll actually process it to minus 16 LUFS, and I find that means that I can get the maximum volume I possibly can get without it clipping before I then mix it all down to the final track. And then on the final track, once I've done the mix down, I generally won't do anything because I try to master each track to get it at the right level. I might put it through, I love Adobe Audition's match volume setting, which enables me to get the final product to minus 19 LUFS. But often I find when I run that, not very much changes. So there's just that last bit at the end, and then and that's me. Squash it to an MP3.
So it's mono, right? Minus 19 mono.
Yeah.
Okay. So really, do you prefer mono over stereo, or are you doing it just to save the file size?
Generally to save the file size, because I'll process so I've tried lots of different settings for the MP3 setting. I tend to go quite high. So I'll process it to an MP3 at 48 kilohertz, 32-bit, and 128 kilobytes per second, because I like to try and keep the quality as pristine as I possibly can. That's really important to me. I know many people won't notice the difference, but I do. And therefore, that means that a 20, 30-minute podcast will be around about sort of between the 20 to 30 megabytes. And then if I'm doing a big long, like an interview, an hour one and so on, be up to maybe 50, 55 megabytes. And I go out once every fortnight. So, that works within the setup I get for my podcast hosting and so on.
Nice. So what are your future plans with podcasting? I mean, you're going to obviously continue doing this show. Do you want to start other shows? What's in the future for you?
I do want to start other shows. And I suddenly go cold when I think about what I've been through to set up this show.
Yeah.
So I guess having learned what I've learned, it might be I can start other shows. I'd quite like to get into much more of a conversational. I tend to find this show is quite a broadcast. It's a transmission. Here's some stuff. It's interesting. Go and have a look at it. But it's me talking to the audience. I'd like to do a show maybe where it's me, like yours, Chris, interviewing somebody, chatting to them, having a much more relaxed kind of conversational piece, or even just start to do some of the more wacky stuff, and maybe some more of this audio soundscaping. Who knows? I might be transmitting from the top of Everest next time you hear me.
Oh man, please! Oh, that'd be awesome. Getting there would be the best thing. Wow, and getting back.
But I love the idea of going out in the field. I've got a rucksack that has all of my gear in it, so I've got a complete mobile kit, so I can go out and record. I've got a little lav mic. Got the Shure, and of course you got the mics on the Zoom. So more field work, but less of me standing in a field.
Nice. Are there any parts of your production workflow that you struggle with a little bit still?
I think for me probably it's that balance between me being a perfectionist and editing, and getting that down to a reasonable time. And I've worked really hard at that, but I tend to find that because I go for quality, and I'm still learning, Chris, I'm still at a very early stage in this, so it's often learning by mistake. But because I want to get that great quality, I will tend to spend a lot of time. So I suppose the learn for me is recognizing actually, when can you let go? When is that okay? And you don't need to spend another 25 minutes editing that piece to get it just right. So I think that's the next thing. I'd like to upgrade the mic, and I like the sound of either the Shure SM7 or the Electro Voice. So one of those, maybe on the horizon at some point in the future. I'd like to have a mic that has a maybe a wider dynamic than the Rode gives me, and kind of gets me closer to my condenser mic, but is still forgiving enough. So that's the next piece of equipment, and probably
there's
time
always
to upgrade the laptop. So
okay, there's always the Rode Broadcaster. People are loving that one. That's a condenser, but I want to try that one too.
how does it sound? Did you say you tried it?
Oh no, I want to try it as well.
Yeah,
I haven't tried it yet.
and that's a challenge, isn't it? Because going, finding somewhere where you can try those out, and of course, every person's voice is different. And one of the things I have learned about this is that there seems to be within the industry, you've got to have the SM7, you've got to have the Electro Voice. They tend to be the mics of choice. I gave up quite a long time ago watching mic shootouts on YouTube because I just figure, that works for you, but I've got to find one that works for me. And I find that because the quality is really important to me, I need to find one that's right for my voice. So I shall probably be taking my Zoom H5N along to one of the music shops and say, listen, let me plug that into here, have a listen, try a few, then come home and listen and see what the sound is, because it's really important.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Steve, we have run our course for this session. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Wow. Thank you very, very much. I massively appreciate it. I was humbled and slightly starstruck when you said, come on. I've learned so much from you and every one of your guests, and some of them I've listened to 2 or 3 times. And the one thing I think I've got out of all of this is actually you can learn technical stuff, but you've got to find things that are right for you. And it's knowing what to do to make it sound right for you that your show has helped me for. So you have been a big part in my podcast. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so happy to be that and to talk to you. And I forgot to mention that when you said that, one of the things you want to get a better balance at, or kind of speed up your production time so it doesn't take as long, while maintaining the quality that you want, that will happen over time. I mean, you're only 22 episodes in. You're still, in a way, in the beginning. And you will... the trial and error stuff is what kind of takes a lot of time and can be frustrating, but you will get a lot faster, trust me, because you'll know, first of all, you'll be able to work the software better and you'll get faster with all that stuff, but then your ear will get better and you'll just know certain things, and like you'll just know what you're hearing, and then you'll can level things out, and then boom, just tweak it up and render it, and you're done. So that'll definitely speed up.
Every day's a school day.
Yeah, and it's not easy, but as long as you're having fun, then you can learn. And then
absolutely.
Someday,
when the fun stops, I'll power off.
Yeah. So your podcast is called Sharp. So go check it out, everybody.
Yeah, so
Sharp. Go ahead.
Sharp Podcast, and it's at the website, which is I'm sure you'll put stuff in the show notes and so on. Sharppodcast.com. One word, 2 P's. Sharp Podcast.
There you go. So check
social
out
media in it and everywhere as well.
Right. So check out what Steve's doing. Check out his voice. Check out these little soundscaped excerpts he's putting in there. Check out Steve in the field and Steve in the studio. And this has been great. Well, Steve, keep us abreast of how it's going with you, and we'll check out your show. And if you have any questions, definitely email me. And for you listening, thank you for listening. I know you got a lot out of this. I did. And check out all our previous episodes. Check out podcastengineeringschool.com. And of course, Steve, I know you know what to say. I don't even have to remind you, but we have to wait for the music to come. All right. Let's do it. Sound great. Sound great. Woo!